Welcome and thank you for joining us for the third and final Schools Think Next online conversation hosted by British Council Northern Ireland. My name is Michael Arlow. I'm Head of Education and Society at British Council in Northern Ireland. Schools Think Next is a series of online conversations bringing local and international perspectives to vital conversations about learning from the experience of COVID-19, as well as possibilities for longer-term system change. We've had great engagement from around the world with these events, with registrations coming from more than 50 countries, including Colombia, Maldives, Iran, Montenegro, Senegal, and USA. The impact of COVID-19 has given us all an unprecedented opportunity to see the world in a new way and to craft an education system that better meets the needs of our young people. Before the COVID-19 lockdown in March, the Northern Ireland school sector was already preparing for change. The New Decade New Approach deal in January 2020 agreed to an independent review of the education system. Schools Think Next engages with a wide range of local and international educational thinkers, researchers, practitioners and others to explore possible answers to two key questions. What should be left in the past and what should be embraced for the future? We've already had a fantastic response to our short videos of educational thinkers, including most recently Professor Siobhan O'Neill, Dr. Noel Purdy and Andreas Schleicher, who is joining us on the panel today. The wider international online engagement builds on local thinking and provides a platform for sharing ideas and experience across different countries. You can join the conversation by commenting or asking questions today or posting on social media. In fact, why not make your own video presenting your vision for the future of education here? Just make sure you use the hashtag SchoolsThinkNext. Today's event is the third of three online conversations, and this one focuses on Vision 2030. Each event has included teachers from Northern Ireland and education experts from around the world. And first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how today's event will be organised. It'll be recorded and a video will be available on the British Council Northern Ireland website in a couple of days. If you're on social media, please post about today. And again, we're using the hashtag SchoolsThinkNext, and you can follow British Council Northern Ireland on Twitter. There are closed caption subtitles available so you can read what the speakers are saying. These are available in English, Arabic, French, German, Italian, Portuguese and Spanish. There's a small button with CC at the bottom of your screen, and if you click that, you can choose your language. It's computer generated and may not be completely accurate, and we apologise if there are any translation mistakes. We're going to start by asking our panellists some questions to introduce the topic before moving to an open conversation on what schools and our school system should leave in the past and embrace for the future. There's an opportunity for you to ask questions today and to make comments on the topic Vision 2030. If you have a question or a comment, please type it into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of the screen. If it's for a specific panellist, just add their name. We won't publish repeated questions and comments. Instead, if you see a post that you like or a question that you also want to ask, then just use the thumbs up button, and this helps us to identify popular themes to put to the panel. I should also say that our chair for today is Sarah Travers, broadcaster and journalist, and we're having some technical difficulties getting Sarah connected at the minute, but hopefully she'll be able to join us shortly and she'll be able to take over for the day. First of all, let me introduce the panel. And we're delighted again to welcome four excellent panelists, and thank you to all of you for sharing your time and experience with us today. We'll hear from Michelle Corkey. Michelle is the Director of Education at the Northern Ireland Education Authority. She took up the role in just March last year and was formerly Principal of St Ronan's College in Lurgan. She has over 28 years of experience in various schools in Northern Ireland at both primary and post-primary levels. She led the successful amalgamation of 3 schools to become St Ronan's College Lurgan, one of the largest all-ability grammar schools in Northern Ireland. Secondly, Justin Edwards. Justin has been Chief Executive of CCEA, that's Northern Ireland's curriculum and qualifications body, since 2014. Prior to joining CCEA, he worked in further and higher education. Justin is the UK representative to the European Commission Digital Skills Working Group and a member of BBC Northern Ireland Education Broadcasting Council and a member of the British Computer Society. Mary Lindsay taught science at St Mary's College for 21 years, and she was principal from 2006 to 2020. St Mary's College has an international reputation for organisational excellence and is regarded as an innovative school with a very broad curriculum and a particular focus on STEM subjects. Mary believes in the importance of equity in education and in the need to trust and value teachers to engage and empower pupils. She sees schools as learning communities, but thinks that you can build a more powerful learning community when schools work together in meaningful ways. And finally, Andreas Schleicher, who is the Director for Education and Skills at the OECD. He initiated and oversees the Programme for International Student Assessment, or PISA, and other international instruments that have created a global platform for policymakers, researchers, and educators across nations and cultures to innovate and transform educational policies and practices. So, before we begin, let me just check if we have managed to connect with our chair. And I don't think that we have. So let's go to our first question, and I'm going to address the question to Michelle Corkey. And I'd like to ask you, Michelle, how important is the upcoming review of education in Northern Ireland? How much potential do you think it has to reshape education here?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon. Despite all the challenges that the virtual world gives us, I'm delighted that we're here. Before I begin, I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate our schools for the tremendous way they have risen to the challenge of the last 12 months. And I know a lot of our conversation this afternoon will highlight the many challenges that our system faces, but I just want to start by commenting on the tremendous creativity, resilience, and flexibility that our school communities have demonstrated. And they have broken down our classroom walls, they've reimagined their practice, and they've reset their pedagogy. And this gives us a great baseline for any review moving forward. So how important is our review? More important than ever. All systems need to change and reset. And over the last 12 months, it is those organisations who have met the challenge that has been thrown down by COVID-19 and have reimagined their organisations, their businesses, their communities. And that is how they are growing and surviving in this new world that we find ourselves in. So I suppose the same must be said about our education system. Can I be clear in saying that our education system before COVID needed to be reviewed? And what the crisis has done is really put the spotlight on that. But more importantly, those people, our key stakeholders, have realised that actually we can change. We have the ability to change, and we have the ability to develop for the better. We need to create the opportunities that our young people need to be better contributors to the world that we find ourselves in. And there's been much debate in recent years about what a new education system would look like. But over the past 12 months, it has become abundantly clear that we need our schools. Our schools are vital. We need our teacher-pupil interactions, and we need to reimagine how we deliver education. We need to look at our school environment. We need to look at our policy making, and we need to make our learning real. But more importantly than anything, we need to look at how we are funding our schools. There is absolutely no doubt of the value of online learning, but it has to be supported by an enhanced pedagogical efficacy of teachers and schools in new ways of learning. We need to build our capacity. We've often said that teachers are facilitators for learning. I think it has become clear over the last 12 months we need teachers to be teachers. And we need students. We need to facilitate students in their learning, but teachers are teachers. Our current system is not sustainable, and the last 12 months have highlighted that. We have a very complex educational landscape, and we need to do something to address that. We have much to celebrate in our system, but we have a long tail of underachievement, and this review is at a very timely point in our education system. Our system of assessment is not aligned to our curriculum. Our curriculum is not aligned to the skills needed for the 21st century. I would say it's approximately 15, well, probably more, 20 years ago that I became a senior leader in a school, and we were talking about preparing our young people for jobs that didn't exist. We're still using that language, but nothing has changed. We need to be creating flexible, independent, critically thinking young people, and that's why this review is desperately needed. It has huge potential, and I sincerely hope that all of those involved in carrying out this review and making the decision realise that we must put our children at the centre of our decisions.
Thanks, Michelle. Some very clear messages there. And you rightly make the point about the adaptations that schools and teachers have had to make over the last year. And Mary, I suppose you're very closely connected to that through your existing relationships with teachers and principals. How do you think the COVID lockdown is changing the way that teachers think of themselves and of their role?
Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you for the opportunity to take part in this very interesting discussion this afternoon. And I'll begin by confessing that I sought some help from current teachers and principals online and asked them to tell me how they felt their role had challenged rather than me guessing for them. So I have to start by thanking them for their feedback to me to help me, and also to add my words of congratulations and appreciation to our whole school community, not just our teachers, for what was really a colossal effort, and still is a colossal effort in their parts in negotiating their way through the uncertainties that COVID has presented and doing the very best possible for our children and young people. And I'm in awe of them, really. But what did they say? How did they see their role changing? Well, centre stage was well-being. Well-being and mental health of our young people has moved centre stage for teachers and for school leaders. But it isn't just the student well-being, it is the well-being of the entire school community. And I think every single person that responded to me mentioned this in some context or other. And there is evidence that many teachers are upskilling in this area, doing first aid for mental health, and developing the skills that they feel they need to be able to support pupils in this new environment. As you would expect, also very prominent in the feedback I received was the centre place of remote learning, the way that has, what would you say, the rapid shift to online learning. And you would expect the teachers talked about upskilling their own digital skills to enable the best possible opportunity for our young people, but also to, and Michelle referenced this, looking at the pedagogy again to see how they could improve remote learning. There was clear evidence also of the huge effort being made to bring on board those students who are not engaging in online learning. And as you would expect, the digital divide was mentioned on several occasions, and the huge effort that teachers and principals are making to bridge that divide. And I'll pay tribute to the young girl locally here in Derry, Ellie Jo, who raised that concern by saying she was doing her entire A-levels on her smartphone, and also Owen Barr, who has a great laptop scheme where he's updating old laptops and distributing them to students. And at the minute, I think over 70 laptops have been distributed. So those were the learning focuses that were mentioned. But what was most interesting was the feedback I received from principals who are leading in crisis. And they talked, there was a number of things that struck me when I looked at what they'd said. Clearly the need for connectedness and communication in an online setting. Obviously the need to communicate with students and their families and so on. But they talked also about the need for collaboration. One principal talked about turbocharged collaboration working with leaders in other schools. There was great stress caused by decision making and the context in which they were having to make decisions. They felt they were in a reactionary mode, getting conflicting messages, sometimes on a daily basis, and often they felt they were making decisions that were at odds with the guidance from the department, from the government, and from other statutory agencies. One principal talked about feeling at sea sometimes, and someone else said they felt they were up against the system. And the other thing that struck me about their feedback was that all the principals articulated a heightened sense of responsibility. A heightened sense of responsibility clearly for their students, especially the most vulnerable, but also a huge sense of responsibility for the wider community. And that even extended to what one principal called a huge sense of civic duty and moral purpose. And you know, when you think about that, and I think about just over a year ago when I left St. Mary's, at this stage, I would have been focused on performance measures. I'd have been looking at benchmarks. I'd have been thinking about league tables. I'd have been up to my eyes in the school budget and financial planning and wondering about my school enrolment numbers. Well, you have to ask yourself, where has all that gone? And look at where the focus is now. So again, thank you to the teachers and the principals who contributed.
Thanks, Mary. I think at times change in education can feel very slow, but no one can doubt the amount of change and the speed of change that's taken place over the last year. And Justin, coming to you, maybe like to focus on that for a moment. How good an education system do you think we have here in Northern Ireland, and what are the big challenges that we need to face going forward?
Thanks, Michael, and thank you for the invite to join today, and thank you for all the listeners who are listening and joined us today. Northern Ireland has historically been known as having a strong education system, and even recent data would support that claim. Northern Ireland has very strong reading abilities, the processing of literature, the understanding, the finding of information through written text seems to come out strong consistently by any measure. Not taken away from the OECD, but you know, we've had OECD reports on PISA and TIMSS and PIRLS, and consistently it's shown that Northern Ireland is strong there. I think that the recent 2018 OECD PISA report showed that out of the 70 odd countries that participated in that globally, there are only 10 countries above Northern Ireland in terms of reading capability, so we do have strength. We do also have strength in mathematics. The majority of countries in PISA in 2018 were behind Northern Ireland, about 45 countries behind Northern Ireland, but there's about 17 countries in front of us in that measure, so maybe a little bit more strength to be gained in mathematics, but still a strong position from which to stand on. And a lot of this comes from, I believe, a strong position in our primary schools. Strong understanding of education, and really the adoption of a skills-based curriculum in our primary schools has been very strong, particularly over the last 15 years, and is fed into our post-primary system, and that strength has carried through. But also some strengths in the changes in pedagogy and the changes in practice that Michelle and Maria have referred to, their constant evaluation and constantly moving on in what we achieve. So Northern Ireland continues to go from strength to strength. I'm not saying that there aren't areas that can't be improved, but there are strengths there. I think the PISA, obviously conducted in 2018, and the report only coming out recently, was before COVID, and COVID has undoubtedly had a huge disruption on the learning and teaching. I think I concur with the other speakers. you know, the education system in Northern Ireland has adapted marvellously. The leadership that's come forward, the strength and the passion in finding alternative methods to deliver and continue education despite the disruption going on around us, and stepping up to that has really made a difference. But it's going to be over time that we're going to understand what that's done to the impact of our young people and what that's done to those indicators, like, you know, understanding of numeracy and the understanding of literacy. And it's going to take a while before we can baseline some of that work out. I think in Michelle's opening remarks, she made mention around the curriculum, and yes, the curriculum needs to constantly be reviewed and thought about. We need to keep up with the times, and COVID is going to introduce new thoughts around digital processes, about online learning, about distributed learning, about flexibility in learning as well, and the curriculum is going to have to adapt on those bases. I've given you a lot of metrics there, but I think just at a human level beyond those metrics, I'm also starting to see people coming to Northern Ireland and bringing their families to Northern Ireland because of the strength of the education system. And I think that there's no better accolade than when people wish to come to a place because its education is strong. And long may that continue. It is one of the glowing strengths of Northern Ireland in its broadest sense, and it is having a global reach in terms of people's appreciation of what we do.
Thanks, Justin. At this point, I had hoped to go to Andreas Schleicher to ask a little bit about the global trends in education at the moment, but I'm afraid, again, we're having some technical difficulties getting Andreas on board. Hopefully he'll be able to join us shortly, and we can include him in the conversation. So, Michelle, I'm going to come back to you and refer directly to the review process, and the documents, the terms of reference for the review, describe the education system here as being unsustainable. And I'm just wondering what, in your opinion, needs to happen to make our system more sustainable?
I don't think there's any argument to be had about our system being unsustainable. That's absolutely clear. And certainly when you look at research from the University of Ulster published recently, they call that out very, very clearly. The funding is not being used efficiently, and we have too much duplication. And if we continue as we are going to have a problem. And Justin has called it out admirably. We have a good education system. I don't think there's any question about that, but it's not efficient, and it will crash and burn. And Mary, you will appreciate this. You made reference to your financial planning just a year ago for both of us. That makes it abundantly clear that our schools cannot continue the way they are because our system just doesn't have the money to sustain it. And when you look at the impact that COVID is going to have on how our system is going to be funded, that's going to be an added pressure. So it isn't sustainable. So we do need to look, and that's where the review feeds into that sustainability and gives us something to look forward to and to create. So we have a very complex educational system, and we have a lot of division, and we have a lot of social divide, and that all needs to be taken into consideration. And without jumping to the end, Mike, you asked us what our vision for education was, and I suppose that's really what we're trying to outline here today. What we need is a system of schools that are focused on the needs of every child in our care, not just a few. Our schools need to be accessible to all children, and all children should have a fun, agile, flexible learning experience. Now, I don't mean to keep harping back to COVID, but look at the experience that some of our children have had over COVID. For some of our children, school is the worst place in the world, but they've been allowed to learn at home. And I have no doubt that has suited a large percentage of students in our system. And some students will have grown much more than they might have in a school system because the flexibility and the agility in that kind of system allows them to do it. So as we move forward, I think we need to look, and I think I said that a moment ago, we need to look really at the school environment, the school estate. We absolutely need to invest in our school estate because there hasn't been enough investment in it. And some children sit in beautiful buildings and some children don't. And we need to look at that. And the truth of the matter is we have too many schools. And if we were to realign our system, then we might be able to provide better facilities for everybody. We also need to look at the investment in our teaching staff. And I think that the the professionalism that we've shown our teachers, and I recognise Mary's point, it's not just our teachers, it's all those who work in schools supporting our young people. But their professionalism in terms of assessment last year and assessment moving forward, I think we have a model there. I think we can look at different forms of assessment, but teachers are going to need to be invested in. And we need to look at a programme that promotes raising standards in this new world, but it's promoting innovative practice and shifting to e-content. Now, I want to be clear, digital learning is not the be-all and end-all. We need a hybrid of both, but our staff are going to need to be trained to move into that space. But we also need to look at our policy making. We need to look at our curriculum. We need to look at our assessment. The Minister has stated that he's going to look at the school starting age. We need to be working much more closely with other government departments like health, so that we can join up the thinking, so that our schools become places where the needs of the children, all the needs of the children, are being met. Mary referenced the health and well-being. Look at our young people. They need a wraparound support. The school should be at the centre of the community. And if we're building schools that are at the centre of their community in purpose-built buildings that everybody can access, not just some, that everybody can access, then our system becomes much, much more sustainable.
Thanks, Michelle. You've clearly outlined our big challenges around the school estate, investment in teachers and well-being and other issues as well. And Justin, I'd like to come back. You mentioned the curriculum, and I'd like to come back to that. There's always time to reflect and to think about what's in the curriculum and how it needs to change. But what do you think are the big challenges for our Northern Ireland curriculum as we move towards the review?
We did a curriculum study report actually in 2019, and we had opportunity to publish that just before the pandemic and the impact in March, really, here in Northern Ireland back in February 2020. And what was interesting about the curriculum was that there was clear agreement, and a lot of our study involved over 300 educational practitioners in Northern Ireland. There was a lot of agreement, about 80% agreement, that the aims and objectives of the curriculum were very clear, and that the progression through the curriculum was very clear, but that there were some areas inside the curriculum that needed to move forward or move on. I think that one of the key areas was the adequacy of the curriculum in preparing learners for future life and future work. That idea that a curriculum should be forward-facing, preparing young people for the future that they face, rather than just responding to the reality they face today. And in that respect, actually the areas of personal development, mutual understanding, but also learning for life and work in the post-primary were not always valued or prioritised in the right way that would enable a curriculum to build a rounded young person so that they were able to progress that into future life. The second one was transition from primary to post-primary, and then transition from Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 4. And the transition from primary to post-primary wasn't always as neat, practitioners felt, as it could be, enabling learners to make a seamless transition so that there wasn't any reduction in confidence in learning or any understanding of learning in that transition, but also the mismatch between Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. Obviously, as we transition from Key Stage 3, from a skills-based curriculum, to Key Stage 4 with high-stakes assessment and subjects specified through the likes of GCSE or Level 2 qualifications, it takes a move away from skills-based holistic learning, sometimes into domains of learning, and knowledge becomes more prevalent than skills and application. And that isn't always aligned to what we're hearing is required from industry and society about our future. I think that the third area that came up was, at that time, was about digital skills and the importance of digital competency, particularly with inside our young people. And I find a synergy with what Michelle said there earlier about investing in our teachers, being able to prepare our teachers for the use of digital learning, digital devices, actually in advance of COVID would have served us well into COVID. Now, we've done exceptionally well with some of the work we've done around C2K, but actually further investment ready for digital skills and ready for a digital world will do nothing more than support learners in a future life and a future context. So hopefully those three areas in a broad curriculum give a sense of maybe three priorities that could be worked on.
Thanks, Justin. And again, just really to take a different angle on the same sort of theme, Mary, from your experience of working with teachers and with direct contact with young people, what do you think we need to do to make sure that our young people are given that best chance of positive outcomes?
Well, if I could be very, what do you say, answer this very easily and say everything that Michelle and Justin have just talked about. But I suppose really I would begin by hoping, or I believe that what it really is needed, that everybody that works with our young people and are involved in their education, first and foremost, believes that every child can learn and every child can succeed, but that they understand that success will not look the same for all our children. And in that way, the starting point of their education is a sense that every child has a sense of self-worth and feels valued. And yes, of course, as Michelle has pointed out, they need great teachers. So we need to value and trust teachers, and this has come up before. We need to provide great initial teacher training, and I think there's work to be done with that here in Northern Ireland. And you know, I used to say to staff, if your own professional development is not outstanding, I'm not doing my job properly. We need great professional development. And often now that is found, as you will see through COVID, it is found in collaboration and these learning networks. And we need also to increase the opportunities for our teachers to learn from and with other teachers in other schools right across the world. We do need, Michelle mightn't like this, we do need more resourcing and financial support, and that may mean that we look for greater efficiencies in the system, but especially for the early years, we've seen how this impacts on future life chances of our young people. We need to support those with additional learning needs, and I've recently been reading the latest That SEN report, and there's a lot of work and a lot of investment needed to bring those, to give those young people the chance that they deserve. And also, though many groups who are at risk of becoming disengaged in the education process. And I think if we focused whatever efficiencies we can create on those at-risk groups, we would be doing a great service for positive outcomes for all our children. And then, I mean, Justin has talked about the curriculum and the need for greater breadth, and I'm not going to cover a lot of what he has said, but I think that there is an overemphasis on the academic pathways, and they will remain important, but we do need pathways that every single child can learn and progress, and they do need these 21st century skills, but we need to be able to recognise and reward that particular learning. And I do think the early stages of the curriculum, Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, develop these skills particularly well. But you know what, if we were honest, when it comes to Key Stage 4 and post-16 education, it is much more academic focused, and we lose the impetus that had begun in the primary schools and in the lower secondary education. So I think the curriculum does need a lot of attention, and we need to have the rubrics to measure success in that different, broader curriculum and the greater pathways. And then I think that the teachers need to know that they are part of a larger network of support. There needs to be teacher-teacher support, there needs to be school-school networks, and there needs to be better links with FE, HE, with the business community, and with the wider community itself, including the health sector, who look after so many of the emotional needs of our young people. And it reminds me of the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it certainly takes a village to educate a child. And I'm going to end with the point that Michelle addressed, the need to look at underachievement and to provide teachers with the support they need. You know, there is no point in saying it doesn't exist. And I sometimes, when I was principal, got annoyed when people mixed up low achievement and underachievement. But all of us in the profession understand that underachievement does exist, and it's no longer acceptable. We know what to do about it. And it's not a question of shaming anybody. It is a question of providing the professional support for those who need it, be that in the classroom, be it in the school, or even be it in a sector. And underachievement exists in all our sectors, regardless of what their status may be. And there is an imperative for us to address that level of underachievement wherever we see it in a professional way, support, but also the challenge there. And I think that, and I'm delighted that the group has been convened by the Minister, and I think it's an excellent group, and I think that they will bring forward excellent proposals to address and tackle underachievement in the school system. And I think if we had all those in place, we would be a long way towards ensuring that every child has the best possible chance to succeed in our education system.
Thanks, Mary. And we're going to take a few minutes and turn to some questions from the audience. And I have to say there's some really good questions coming in, both when people registered and live at the moment. And a lot of them are focusing around issues to do with exams and with mental health. And if I could maybe put the first question that's come up here. Do you think that we could replace examinations as a way of assessing pupil performance and learning? Do we really need to assess pupil performance in the first place? Or could we not just work to ensure that they're happy, healthy and fulfilled? How can we move to a system of education that puts the value on learning for learning's sake and preparing students for life and work? Interesting question. Justin, I guess maybe we should come to you first on that one, should we? Could we replace examinations as a way of assessing pupil performance?
I think there are many PhD theses written on that question, and we could spend all day just on this question. But so examinations is one word, really, for maybe high stakes tests on a timetabled series. There are many different ways of assessing knowledge, skills and understanding of learners, and assessment has really evolved, particularly over recent years, evolved in its thinking, and could provide opportunities to move away from the desk-based, exam hall-based opportunity. So I think that at a basic level, could we move away from examinations? Yes. I think we have to ask the question, why do we have testing, which is different from necessarily examinations? And assessment is an important part of education. I'm sure there's a lot of educators on the line who would agree with this. We have, the importance of formative assessment, understanding how learners are progressing through the curriculum, what their knowledge, understanding and ability is as they progress, so that we can adapt, we can differentiate learning, we can invest, we can trigger responses from our system, we can trigger policy interventions. So assessment is important as a supportive tool from a formative basis in investing back in learners. So, and without investment, we lack one of the critical tools of education. So I don't think it's a question of removing assessment. And summative assessment is important, particularly when we have transition phases between our learning establishments. So ensuring that learners have a clear understanding of where and what they might progress to, where they have confidence, where they have knowledge, skills and abilities that could be reformed or developed or increased further, so that they can play a role within science, society and the economy as well. But how we get there with assessment, like I said, that can undergo reform and change. I think that there's different approaches we can take at different stages of education. I know that there's been a lot of calls recently in the press around GCSE qualifications, for example, and certainly in 1984, when they were released and replaced the O-level qualification, there was a lot of comment and thought at that time that was related to 16-year-olds who left the education system for employment. Now today, far less young people leave the education system at 16 for employment. They stay on till 18, but they do progress through different pathways. Some stay on at school, some go to further education college, some go to apprenticeships and see great reward from participating in those types of programs. So we might need some form of system, although it might look different. I do think we have a question at that particular stage of the degree of assessment. Do we need to assess as much as we are? Are we fixated on assessing everything? But if we are going to reduce back the assessment, it takes us into an interesting space of what do we value, and therefore what do we assess if we assess what we value. And if we stop assessing something, does that mean we don't value it anymore? Do we still value it from its learning content and its learning opportunity, as opposed to assessing to support the learner in their progression? I also think that there are challenges in post-16 assessment. We've seen a substantial rise in what we would term vocational qualifications. People often return to BTECs, but there are many more other qualifications than BTECs. And in that environment, we still have a great dependency on the A-level qualification, for example, which is predominantly based in the knowledge and understanding space, as opposed to the application space, which tends to derive more from the vocational qualifications. We still need those qualifications for post-18 transfer, because we need those as a summative assessment. But we might be in a place that we could start to reform inwards on that, where the differentiation between two qualification types was less delineated, less separated, and actually we were looking at things like software engineering as having knowledge, understanding and skills, or drama as having knowledge, understanding and skills, and one qualification that covered those elements in those cells. So there's plenty of opportunity for reforming qualifications. I think that change is needed going forward, but I think we have to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and ask ourselves, what's that real value of assessment, and not lose that in the educational process.
Great, thanks, Justin. Mary, I don't know if you have any comment you'd like to make on that particular question.
You know me, I'll always have comment to make. I often felt frustrated with examinations, particularly high stakes paper examinations, that I felt so much of the later part of education in the post-primary sector was about ranking pupils for passage to further and higher education. And I felt that it was such a shame, really, and that so much opportunity was lost in our education in doing this. Now, that probably still needs to happen at some level, but taking Justin's thinking on board, there has to be a better way to measure the success of different types of learners. And I think it's, you know, the examination system that we have is easy. Formative assessment, any educator will tell you, is vital. The summative assessment, and particularly these high stakes written exams that come at the end of the year or at the end of 2 years of learning, maybe there is a better way. They may have a role, but it should only be part of a role, because the academic knowledge is only part of what our young people need to live and work in a global society. So we have to think harder about this and come up with new ways of measuring how successful our learners are and how well they have acquired the skills that will allow them not only to navigate life and work, but also to contribute, you know, to be effective contributors to making the world a better place. This is a troubled world, and there's a lot of challenges out there. And, you know, even here in Northern Ireland, we need to be building peacemakers, peace builders, and that should be central. And we should be able to gauge when they are finished their time in schooling, if we have in some way managed to do this. And we have an excellent citizenship curriculum, but do we know how effective it is and how valued is it? And that's just one example. So I think this is a big challenge for us. And I think, you know, if I was giving it a report card, need to do better.
Thanks, Mary. And that's an interesting point you make in regard to citizenship education in particular. And a question has come in along similar sorts of lines, asking how do we ensure that the global intercultural skills that young people need today as global citizens are reflected in any future education system or in any review of the system. I don't know if anybody would like to tackle that. Global intercultural skills, how important are they and how can we make sure they're there?
Michael, happy to have a
yes, okay, Justin.
Crack at that one. So I think it's a really good point, and the OECD in its last round did consider kind of a global skills assessment, and it never really reached Northern Ireland to look at global skills and global attitudes. But one of the challenges of pulling together a global skills assessment is that globally the skills to be a global citizenship aren't agreed. So in different states and in different jurisdictions, we have different views about what successful globalization is. And that's a particular challenge. I do think, however, that there is opportunity to look at global connectivity and global understanding and global appreciation. And I go back to the point I made earlier around the world around us, or personal development and mutual understanding, which is within inside the curriculum. And a lot of teachers feel that it's not being given the due attention that it needs to be given, where we widen the scope and the horizons of our young people to look outwards from wherever they feel they are in terms of their cultures, in order to look at biases, conscious and unconscious, different ways of life, different systems around us, so that they then, when going into the workplace, can act as a global citizen or a global economic contributor and reach out on that basis. So it comes back to this space within inside the curriculum. Are we using it fully? Are we using that as an opportunity within inside our schools? Are we using it in important phases like Key Stage 4 and post 16 as we're preparing our young people for the world of work or the next steps in their lives? And I think there's some development to do on that basis.
Thanks, Justin. From a very global perspective to a much more local one, a Northern Ireland teacher asks, and Michelle, maybe I could come to you on this one, how can we future-proof an education system that currently separates children based on religion, sometimes gender, sometimes ability? What reforms should take place? Are the separate education sectors viable with such a small population?
Yes, certainly, Michael. I think I've already referenced the duplication and the excessively expensive system that we're running in Northern Ireland. And I suppose if we take this right back to the review, what are we trying to do? What is it actually we want to do in Northern Ireland? Do we want to meet the needs of small pockets of our society and keep it divided? Or do we actually want to do what has been called out in the New Decade, New Approach document and provide our young people with a platform, an education system that celebrates integration, that celebrates equality, and Mary referenced peacemakers. We need to be developing a generation who respect equality, diversity, each other, the differences that we have, and work together despite that. So to take it right back to review, what actually is it we want to do? Do we want to create a system that meets the needs of every single child? And if that's what we want to do, then we need to put in place a curriculum that does that. And therefore, then the divide, be it social, be it religious, be it gender, whatever it is removed. But what we need to do is to create an efficient system that can actually afford to run and meet the needs of children and not separate pockets of society.
Thanks, Michelle. And we're coming towards the end of our time at the minute, and I'd really like to spend a moment or two and think about the issue of well-being that has come up a number of occasions from, I think, probably all of you. There's a very interesting question from an audience member in Vietnam who asks, what steps do we need to take to ensure that the sanctity of children's psychological selves is respected as we move forward? And if I can combine that with the second question that's come in, asking what can we do to ensure that stronger links are made between health, particularly mental health, and education, as is done in Finland, where, for example, happiness is set very firmly at the heart of the curriculum. Those are two questions coming at the issue from maybe two slightly different directions, but any reflections on those? Maybe start with Mary. Well-being, mental health and education, where does it all fit together for you?
Well, you know, I think the emphasis that I had received from the teachers and principals who engaged with me when I asked the question for this shows that well-being and mental health has moved centre stage, and with COVID and post-COVID, it's going nowhere. And we fail to recognise this and address this in our schools at our peril. And it is probably had moved centre stage before COVID, but we were slow to address it. But in many ways, the commitment and the efforts being made by our teachers and by all our school staff, because many and often it's the learning support assistants and people like that that are making the efforts to contact those that are hard to reach and so on. So I think there's a huge effort in our schools to address well-being and mental health. We need people like Siobhan O'Neill working with us in our schools to help us better know how to do this. What works well and what doesn't work well. She provided great guidance to me as a leader when we were addressing this in our school a few years ago, and I think it is great that we have a champion like her in Northern Ireland, and I know she would be very willing to work with those of us involved in education to help us shape an education and a curriculum that put mental health and well-being at the centre. And you know, Michelle mentioned something at the very start. She mentioned about schooling being fun. You know, young people spend so long in school, and be that even virtual or face-to-face, they need to enjoy it. We need to bring some joy back into learning. And maybe if we reduced the amount of testing and decided what was essential to test and brought back the joy of learning and exploring, investigating, and brought that back in and put the child at the centre, maybe then the well-being would begin to take care of itself. And for schools to know that there is plenty of help and plenty of agencies that have expertise that schools can draw on when they know the children are in, and indeed their school staff are in need of that additional support, because often it only becomes to the attention of teachers and other staff when it has developed to a critical point. So we need to make learning fun again, and we need to make sure that both the pupils and the staff are enjoying what they're doing.
Thanks, Mary. Some great questions coming in. A very good one on underachievement, and I know, Justin, you've been responding to it in the chat already. So if you're interested in underachievement, I'd point you to that answer, which is very helpful. I'd like to focus, though, just in closing on teachers again. And a question has been posted saying that during lockdown, teachers have shown enormous resilience, creativity and collegiality. How do we make sure we don't lose that as we come out of lockdown? I don't know if you'd have any reflections on that, Michelle.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, Mary, you raised that as some of the feedback that you received from principals, that when we're in crisis, that connectivity and connection is vitally important. And it has been a lifeline to many families who have maybe felt that find it difficult to manage in these circumstances. But what the virtual world, despite some of the difficulties we've had today, has proven to us is that actually we can still stay connected even if we're not still physically in a room. And we talked about globalization earlier on, Justin referenced it. I think the possibilities here are endless. For example, I speak with two colleagues, one in Wales and one in Scotland, and we're planning joint principal forums where people can come together. Now, maybe we would have thought of that 2 years ago, but we might have thought, oh no, it's too troublesome. But now we've got that platform, we've got that connectedness, we've got that connectivity. I also think expectations now have been raised. So we've got teachers and parents and students connected. We've got our health department connected, and I don't think we're going to lose that. And now perhaps we need to tailor that and be clear about the expectations moving forward. But we've got those links and we can build on that. And parents have a greater understanding now of how school works and what their expectations are. And teachers can see the value of the parents working at home. So that's a connectedness and a support that we need to build on. Have we got it right? No, we still have much to do. And Mary, I think you raised that point as well, that communication issue is still a problem. We need to work through that. But we've created a tremendous platform that if channeled in the right way can be built on and developed.
Thanks, Michelle. And if you've asked a question and we haven't had time to put it to the panel, can I suggest that you take it onto social media and post the question there and see what responses we begin to get. In conclusion today, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to take a moment and ask them to present their vision for the future of education in Northern Ireland in just a sentence or two. And I think, Michelle, sorry to come back to you so quickly, but I think we're coming to you first of all. What's your vision for the future of education in Northern Ireland?
Okay, well, everything that has been said today, Mary, can I take your update? I would dearly love to be involved in the creation of a system that provides every single child with the opportunity to grow and develop with the appropriate support. Most of all, I want our children to be happy. They need to belong to a very inclusive environment with teachers who are committed professionals and trained to deal with all of the people in their care's needs. We need to have schools that are fit for purpose, and I'm talking about buildings. We need to have relevant pathways that allow children to enjoy learning and celebrate their learning in whatever way they do. It's very hard to take me out of the classroom, Mike, but I watch young P1s running in through the school gate and cannot wait to get into school. And at primary 3, the same child walking through the gates, approaching it with absolute dread. What are we doing to our young people that we do that to them? We need to give them a joy of learning. So we need to put our schools at the centre of our community to support the entire community with every child's needs being met.
Thank you, Michelle. Justin, same challenge to you. In a couple of sentences, what's your vision for the future of education in Northern Ireland?
I think that one of the things that struck me most recently, and you touched upon it today in the wellbeing discussion, was in the PISA report was a sentence that said pupils in Northern Ireland were less satisfied with their lives than pupils across the OECD. They were more likely to feel sad, scared, worried, and less likely to agree that their life had clear meaning and purpose. I think that any change to the education system surely needs to, at its basis, give young people clear meaning and purpose. And if we achieved that, or we moved that indicator forward, surely many other advantages to society and the economy would fall out of it, but not least young people just being happier.
Thank you. That's hard to argue with. Mary.
Okay, well, I think I have a personal vision for education, and I think all of us have, but I think there's a real danger in that. And I think what's needed is a shared vision. And I think we need a shared vision that will provide better outcomes for every single young person. And Michelle has been very clear about that. We need to place children at the very centre of that vision. And we need to involve young people in shaping that vision. And the second thing I think as part of that vision is a more inclusive, equitable and sustainable school estate. The NISRA population projections tell us that by 2043 there will be 40,000 less 0 to 15-year-olds in our education system. And I suppose that's music to Michelle's ears, because the need for collaboration across all sectors is very, very pressing. There's no way we can manage that falling enrolment in our schools without all the various sectors engaging and finding new ways of working together. And I think you will find them willing to do that in the best interests of all our young people. And the third thing that I think is important for that vision, and by the way, I think a 2030 vision is too soon. I think that a vision needs to be much longer than that. Is the learning experience, and we've talked about the blended learning that is likely to continue post-16, but we also need to, as we've said, have well-being and enjoyment at the centre of learning. The academic will still be important, but it is no longer enough for any young person coming through our education system. They need to be able to think and contribute to society effectively. And we need to build these powerful learning communities, not just for our teachers, but for our entire school communities. And we will no longer really talk about individual schools, but we will talk about powerful learning communities that have grown organically, meeting the needs of the local communities they serve.
Mary, thank you so much for concluding on that note. And that brings us to the end of today's discussion. And first of all, I'd like to thank our panelists for a really interesting conversation that touched on a lot of key topics that I think will be of continuing relevance through the review of education as it unfolds. I also have to apologise to you that our technical issues meant we couldn't connect with our chair, Sarah Travers, or with Andreas Schleicher. But I would refer you to the videos that Andreas made for us, outlining some of his visions for the future of education, and they're on our website, and you can see, you'll see on the screen a link to the website at the very end. If you didn't have time, if we didn't have time to ask your question, why not post it on social media? Use the hashtag SchoolsThinkNext. In the next day or so, you'll receive an email with a link to our feedback form, and we'd love to get your views on this event to inform planning for our future events. Again, thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to seeing you on social media to continue the conversation. And don't forget, we would love you to post your own 2-minute video to share your vision for the future of education. Thank you.